That's a great verse. Like the way that it puts it, particularly with the, the use of the conspiracy theory. That's like, listen, I grew up Muslim. That's all Turks believe, right? Like everything is a conspiracy.
And this isn't saying there's never any conspiracy behind this,
Right.
right?
No, there probably is, and to some extent.
They're all just pieces on a larger chessboard of what God is doing.
It feels like we're living in a simulation.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. Today, we wanted to tackle a specific moral theological question surrounding recent events. So, we are currently in July 2024, and somebody just tried to assassinate President Trump. And I think it's clear at this point there's some sort of divine intervention deal going on here. Is that a controversial take right now?
I mean, it depends on how you're voting. If you watch the RNs, the Republican National Convention, no, it's not a controversial take. It's a given. But go on Instagram threads and look at Biden supporters. That's very controversial.
So I think what's super interesting right now is we are already in a culture that's given over to conspiracy theories. And of course, a near assassination of a presidential candidate is going to dial that way up for a bunch of people.
Right.
And like, how can you not? Like, if you look at everything that's gone on with Biden for the last month, you look at Trump almost getting assassinated. I think it's super easy to be a conspiracy theorist because this all unfolds like it's written by someone.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get that. It's kind of interesting in that, I've heard people talk about it and they say, I heard that the president, there was an assassination attempt. And the number of people who said, and I wasn't surprised, right? Like they were not surprised that someone was going to take a shot at him. They were just kind of subconsciously waiting for it. But then it happens, and then it happens and unfolds in the way it does. It's like, it's insane, you couldn't find a episode of that on, any streaming service, right? Like it's a Netflix episode.
Yeah, it is. It's really, this is, whether you like him or dislike him. I think Donald Trump has now been cemented in what will be American mythology for a long time to come.
Right.
Because it's just one of these mythic civilization shaping moments that everybody's going to remember for a long time.
Right.
That's going to define us for time to come.
Yeah. And, all of it plays in, right? So it's the fact that he's an ex-president, running against a sitting president. He's had legal issues, right? And all of these things. And, just at like the doorway to the election, you know what I mean? It's, somebody tries to take a shot at his head, right? In like almost Keystone Cops fashion, you know what I mean? Because it was so much, it's apparent bubbling by the Secret Service and everyone else tasked with protecting him.
So let's analyze a little bit more. Like there's a lot of talk that this is some sort of, an inside job. People are actually saying that they planted the sniper
Yep.
in the crowd
Mm-hmm.
to basically make it look like he had an assassination attempt because of how good it would be for his polls in his campaign.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
Okay. I would like to tell any of those people that they have never actually shot a rifle. Because to make that shot and miss, like, okay, everyone talks about how, on the news, how easy a shot it is to make, right? How a hunter can make that shot. Um, even with him moving his head around and, ad-libbing and looking and the way that everything all played together. But to just hit the top of the right ear on purpose with a 223 round, right? So 223 round is a very lightweight round. It is subject to wind. It is not meant for sniping, right? People argue that if he had used a caliber more suitable for hunting deer or something like that, had a little bit more impact, the bullet wouldn't have carried as much in the wind, and that he would have made the shot. So I tell anyone, there's no way that it's a conspiracy theory because the shot is impossible. I mean, this isn't a video game. You know what I mean? These are real people with, real-time interactions. Another thing you have to take into account is the kid was not an assassin, right? Like not a trained marksman. And then on top of that, doing like, all right, there's one thing to like commit a crime. There's another thing to try and assassinate the president of the United States.
Right.
Right. They're like, there's a certain level of cats in a bag crazy going on up in your head. But then the other part of it is you're a 20-year-old with no military training, right? Not a sniper, trying to hit the president of the United States, in the head, right? With law enforcement and everything else. And
it happens the way it happens because he turns his head slightly to the side,
right,
a split second before the bullet hits him.
right,
Not in response to the bullet,
right,
but just in response. I mean, if you saw the bullet dodge it, that's even more impressive.
right.
But
I saw a great meme, and it was like Neo from the Matrix,
yeah,
like with the bullets going over his head. And I'm going to tell my friends I'm going to tell my kids this was Donald Trump.
Yeah, hard times create great memes.
Right.
So clearly, this is like a 1 in a million thing. And that's why people think are coming up with conspiracies for this. Because this is so just outlandish. All of this is outlandish.
Yeah.
Like
it really is.
Like the whole Biden thing before this is like Shakespearean.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a king in decline.
Right.
Everyone around him is trying to hide that so they may maintain their own position.
I don't really watch the show, but it's House of the Dragon. Like, everybody trying to like get the throne from the sitting king who's like, got leprosy, right? Yeah. Like, it's House of the Dragon.
So that's happening. And then meanwhile, you have this, the bullet comes at the exact right moment that he moves his head. And the fact that this kid got onto the roof that really should have been, and that he got through the Secret Service is also crazy. The fact that it just missed, but enough to hit him, is crazy. And then the female Secret Service agent was just short enough that allowed him to
get his face in the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you'd had like a 6'2" dude there.
No, seriously.
You wouldn't have seen it.
No, you wouldn't have.
Because she was like, 5 foot.
Yeah.
He's able to like loom above her with his fist in the air.
Right.
And it all caught on camera.
Right.
It's so perfect from a cinematic perspective.
Okay, so it's like no secret that Mark Zuckerberg is in it for Biden, right? He's been, a longtime supporter of liberal causes, and in an interview, he said it like Trump standing there with the Secret Service all around him, pumping his fist in the air after getting shot was the most badass thing he's ever seen. Right? So this is Mark Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? Like Mark Zuckerberg probably hates Trump. I'm just gonna go out on a limb, you know?
There's some things from some people that are just going to be inspiring no matter what, right?
Right.
Like, even if it's Hitler, if you have the moment of you tried to get me, but I'm still here, it's like you've got to be okay. I give you that one,
Right.
right? This is one of these moments that, but it's not. It does a little bit about Trump, but really, what it's telling is a story, and and so there's clearly some higher force guiding this. And the conspiracy theorists think it's the Democrats trying to assassinate him, or the Republicans pretending to assassinate him, or some other nefarious conspiracy.
Right.
Because there's clearly some higher hand at play here. Clearly.
Right.
Obviously, there's some higher hand at play here.
Right.
And we're all living in some sort of narrative. But as Christians, we don't need some human conspiracy to believe there's some higher narrative at play here.
I think when you look at like the way that things have been unfolding, it's hard to not want to gravitate towards a conspiracy theory. And it's no matter like, it's not just necessarily just like an assassination attempt on Trump. People are doing that with I don't know, like people still think the world is flat, right? People still think the moon landing was fake. My personal take on that is we have more information at our within our grasp, like quality information that you can get from a multitude of sources, which has made information so plentiful that it's no longer valuable. Right. Because knowledge always used to be power, you know what I mean? And it was what you knew that gave you an edge up on everything. But, whether it's sports, right? Like you hear NFL GM saying everybody has the same scouting reports. So it's really just like a crapshoot on who you pick. And then take that and apply that to the rest of the world. One of my favorite football players thinks the world is flat, right? So where I'm going with that is the ridiculous part of it is there are elements of it that are sound too crazy to believe, but are probably true. And that doesn't make them conspiracies. But one thing that is really hard to see in the middle of a conspiracy is the fact that God was there.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can sit there and say over and over again, well, did you see who's sitting in the stands, or what happened to the lady that they carried out? And, the shooter was in a BlackRock commercial when he was a teenager, and all of these different things. But, if you look for a demon under a rock, you'll find one.
Yeah.
Right? Because honestly, that's what people are looking for in conspiracy theories. But if you look for divine intervention, I guess providence, or whatever you would want to call it, you can certainly see it here.
Right. And I think from a biblical worldview, we see divine intervention here. The question then becomes, what does that actually mean? So let's juxtapose this, right? Because let's say you have Donald Trump, and the moment he literally dodges the bullet, people are saying this is God's hand on the situation. Yet, under the same token, there are innocent children in Gaza who get taken out by shrapnel from a shell aimed at Hamas fighter.
Yep.
Right. So there are children who are dying.
Right.
And God is stepping in to save Donald Trump, but not this kid.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean God loves America more than Gaza? Does that mean God loves Donald Trump more than this kid? Does that mean Donald Trump is God's chosen Messiah? Right? What does that actually mean for us?
I mean, I have a personal story. I was 20 years old, and I had, if you've watched past episodes of this or heard me preach on any different platforms, I have a past. So I've done some dumb things. And one night I was out, uh, I spent way too much time out partying with my friends. And during that, there was like an epic snowstorm. Um, I think in '94, right? Like an ice storm that hit. And the next day I got up and I went to work, and I was driving my mom to work with me in a two-wheel drive pickup truck. And while I'm driving on the road, I lose control of the car. There's like a sheet of ice, and the way that they handled it on that road is there was a creek bed running to the left of me, and then a big wall of ice running to snow that like got covered by ice on the right, and the car started to veer off the road through into oncoming traffic towards the creek. So I just responded by whipping the car back, the truck back the other way, and then I hit the thing of ice, the wall of ice, and drove up on it and flipped the truck over. And at the very last second, if I had just stayed there, I would have been decapitated. But at the very last second, I ducked down and I put my arm around my mom, because it was a small little pickup truck, and I could reach around and I grabbed her to keep her in her seat. And we both walked away without a scratch. My mom had a little scratch on her nose, and the truck was gone. And I remember walking back out to that truck and seeing, the cab over my side, right? So cab of a truck is like this, and the driver's sitting on the left side, and the cab of the truck just went down. It was gone. And if I hadn't ducked my head at the last moment and grabbed my mother, I'd be dead. I would not be talking to you right now. And at the time, I didn't know Jesus. I had no relationship with God. I was actually maybe started a process of me like reevaluating my life choices. But I can look back now and see the hand of God sparing me. But for what? Right? I have decided to live my life for Jesus. It didn't happen in that moment. It happened later. It was a culmination of things that happened that led me to a moment where I realized that time and time again, in ways that I didn't understand, God spared my life. Right? And my inspiration towards that is to move towards God and serve him. Right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So, there have been ways that I could have cheapened that process, or I could have, turned my back on that process. And I think for a couple of years I did, even after that accident. I didn't become a believer until I was 23. So, divine providence in my own personal experience is a thing, right? Like my life was spared. And you could say, my desire to protect my mother, right, saved my life. With Trump, the hard part is when we look at a child in Gaza, right, losing a limb or dying, or a child in Syria. Let's just back up, right? Like, look at what happened in Aleppo and all of these different places. It was horrible, and I've been on missions trips in Africa and, watching people like deliver babies that are like just barely hanging on, and they don't all make it. What did I do to deserve God's favor? And the answer is nothing, right? And I can't say that my life is more valuable than theirs, or Trump's life is more valuable than, anyone else who dies from those circumstances, the people who didn't dodge the bullet, the people who died in the car accidents, the people, who died in utero. But I can say that after, living this out for some time, I know that God has a plan. It just doesn't make sense to me, or I can't see it in its totality, right? I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about, Trump taking the bullet to the ear, and we were talking about, it had just happened. So some people were on the internet saying, "Oh, it was a piece of glass. hit the teleprompter, right? He didn't get shot, but now we know he got shot, right? Like they've slowed the video. I'm sorry, they've slowed the video down, and you can literally see the bullet like piercing his ear. You know, um, they've shown computer models of him moving his head, right? And
I will not believe unless I can put my finger through the hole in his ear.
that's great. And what we were talking about was, well, what if, because he's not a Trump guy, you know what I mean? He's objective, you know, he's kind of independent. And what if, this is his theory, God spared Trump because think of all the other people who would have suffered as a backlash, right? You think that, you know, January 6th was rough. How about a summer of that?
Right.
Right? How about a summer of people who actually know how to use guns?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Who are bent on, you know, getting revenge or payback, right? And then on top of that, think about what happens in that moment to the United States. Like, this didn't all happen, you know. The Trump issues didn't start in 2016. Right? Like the conflict between the political parties, particularly post 9/11, starting with the Bush election in 2000, and working your way all the way forward, has made American politics that much more toxic, and made the media more toxic, and made you know, relationships being severed more and more over politics. Before in America, you didn't talk about politics. You know what I mean? You didn't talk about them. You just moved. You didn't talk about it. You kept it to yourself, and then you just went in the booth and voted.
Right. So I think there's a few things that I like immediately think of here. So just because we've seen God show up in a magical way, it doesn't mean that we know the why yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one mistake people tend to make in times like this is that surviving an assassination attempt miraculously is definitely an endorsement. Like
Right.
the amount of weird stuff I've seen, like this Levitical anointing of the ear.
It's like blood on the right ear.
Blood on
Right.
the blood on the blood on the right ear.
Yeah.
Priest.
Yeah.
That's that's gross.
It's heresy is what it is, right? So
But then also, and I know I shared this with you, but there's also people saying, well, they're talking about the Antichrist in Revelation who appears to have a mortal wound.
Yeah.
And then,
is resurrected. Right. That's an easy one to debunk, though, right? Like, did his heart stop at any time? No.
Yeah.
Like,
but it appeared to have a mortal wound.
Well, right? And listen, what a lame wound to be resurrected from.
Yeah. So there's two ends here of bad exegesis and bad Bible interpretation of what this means, right?
Right.
One means he's the Antichrist, and one means he's the anointed priest with blood on the ear to save America.
It's crazy, right?
So let's get into
and then let's not forget the other extreme where it was like he's a CIA planter, something like that, right? He's a Manchurian candidate.
Let's zero in on the theological themes here, and let's give proper biblical perspective on how we should actually think about this. And actually, this morning I was reading the book of Acts, and I believe it's in chapter 11, maybe 12, when Herod has James, the brother of John, killed. But then that same chapter, God sends an angel to providentially rescue Peter from prison. So in that same chapter, God allows one of his beloved servants to be killed and miraculously rescues another one.
Right.
And so whether you live or die, and orchestrates the death of Herod as well.
Right.
So we see God's lack of rescuing someone from death, God's active rescuing someone from death, and God actually causing the death of an evil politician as well.
Right.
And so just from that one chapter, you see three types of way God intervening in history.
Right.
So we always want to be slow to say exactly what something means.
Yes.
Now, if an angel shows up and gets you out of jail, for sure,
You're supposed to be out.
yeah, you're supposed to be out. You're on God's side.
Right.
God is,
And you don't get hit by like a truck immediately after you walk out
exactly.
or something like that, right?
But just on on the surface level. But one thing we can say for sure as Christians is that Donald Trump has been, if he becomes president, has been picked by God to be president. And
Keep going.
we also have to say that Joe Biden right now has been picked by God to be president as well.
However long it lasts.
However long it lasts.
Right.
For his own reasons.
Yep.
And if Biden has dementia, that's God's doing as well.
Yeah.
So God, the way he works in the political sphere, I want to quote King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon.
Oh, that's a good example.
From Daniel 4. So after he's kind of like lost his mind, been off the scene for a while, comes back to his senses, reestablishes power, he says this, I lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will amongst the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done?
Right.
So Nebuchadnezzar is explaining that the rise of kingdoms, the fall of kingdoms, the rise of kings, the fall of kings, the goings on of leaders, all happened because of the hand of God.
Right.
And God is telling a story through human history that glorifies himself and blesses his people.
Yeah. Nations and kings will rise and fall, but the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Right? Like, I think it's very, I just love the Nebuchadnezzar example. I really love that because they kind of have similarities.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like similar character profiles, you know? Like, look at what I did to Babylon. Right? Like, look at us. I built these palaces and these gardens, the most beautiful gardens you've ever seen. Like,
right. Like Nebuchadnezzar fluctuates in the story between your God is the true God, and I worship him to have everyone build a giant gold statue of me and have them worship it.
Right.
My best Babylonian accent there.
Right. I know. I'm all crossed up right now. Like, do you do New York? Do you do?
So Nebuchadnezzar's
Habibi.
Nebuchadnezzar's faith journey is like this, right?
Yeah, right.
And
has real experiences, right? Like sees a theophany of Jesus after he throws 3 Jews into an oven, right? Like, you know what I mean? Has Daniel, right? Whom the book of Daniel is written about, like serving, him, and has a very real and humbling encounter with God, right? With the living God. So, we can only hope that all of our leaders have that tight of a relationship, right? Or that much interaction with God to humble them when they get too arrogant, or to correct them when they need correcting, right? Or guide them when they need guiding.
So there's that on the one hand, right? And then in Romans 13, what we're told is that, so Romans 13:1 says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God.
Right.
So you can't pick and choose this.
Yes.
Right. This is a broad thing. This includes Donald Trump. It includes Joe Biden. It includes
Vladimir Putin's the first name that comes to mind, right?
It includes Kim Jong-un.
Right. Or Zelensky, or any of them. Right.
So all these things mean that God is putting all these people and removing them for his own purposes,
Right.
for the story that he himself is telling through human history.
Right.
And we want to be really, really slow to say something miraculous happened, therefore God is on the side of our guy.
Right. I mean, if you were to look at like ancient Hebrew tradition, okay, the first leader who takes power over the entire earth is a guy named Nimrod, right? Which has always seemed ironic to me because, like, you know, growing up, the word Nimrod was kind of like you're a fool, right? Like you don't know what you're talking about. But it's the name of a mighty hunter who takes power over the earth. And um, according to some beliefs, you know, Nimrod is alive um, during the time of Abraham's father, right? That there's like this kind of, you know, crossover. I'm not exactly sure how that all crosses out. You know, I'm not sure it lines up with the flood or anything like that. I'd have to go back and look. But the point is that there have always been these political figures who have earthly dominion, right? It goes all the way back to the beginning of the Bible. And working its way all the way through, you can see God working through those things, or despite those things, right? The Babylonian captivity is a great example of it. A lot of the stories in the Bible are showing how God is sovereign even in the midst of an unjust government, right? Even in the midst of a people being punished, right, for their past iniquity, people being corrected. It's actually really funny to me too, because I've been like reading the book of Numbers lately, which a lot of people don't read because it's associated with actual numbers.
Right.
And you know what you're seeing is a leader in Moses, right? Who's a good leader, has his moments of weakness, leading a people who are awful, right? And complaining and rebellion. There's 7 rebellions in the book of Moses, and the book of Numbers that are, you know, a big deal to the Jewish people, and you know the Bible as a whole. But still giving them like victories over kings in the middle of this, right?
Right.
So here's the point that I'm trying to make. Okay, there are leaders, and there are things that God installed in the world, and then there are forces that come into play that remove those leaders or install those leaders, right? And these things have been happening the entire time. But if you look at like the story in the book of Numbers and, you know, Balaam and some of the other things and where we are today, it's easier to see those things in hindsight.
Yes.
Right? That's how you navigate. You see it in hindsight. You can say, you know, like when I flipped that truck over, I literally dodged a bullet. Right? Like God spared my life. Didn't see it at the time. You know, I'm pretty sure I went back to, you know, I'm okay. I'm going to go back and do the things I was doing before. And I missed the idea that there was a God who was protecting me. People were telling me, right? Like my Christian coworkers, my mother's a Muslim and she's like, God protected us. Right? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But, you know, there was a moment where God like made it evident to me. And I think this is one of those moments where you're seeing a lot of people going, this is evident to me that this is not normal. This is beyond this is beyond my comprehension. And I think it starts at people who don't believe in God, like starting to have conversations about God, right? Or people who are atheists, you know, trying to like do the calculus in their brains as to how it's like a conspiracy theory or how it could be possible.
Cute meme of lady with the calculator.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? But now people are coming to the point where they're like, well, how do you miss the shot? How do you survive that? Right? And then on top of that, be able to like have all of the things that happen immediately after with the fist pump and the picture and the, you know what I mean? Like, how do you do that? Well, you know, is it because God is for Trump? I don't know.
Right.
Right.
So the danger is not seeing divine intervention. That's clear.
Yeah.
The danger is interpreting that too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact is, we do not yet know what it means. But what it does show us, right? So if you're a Republican who wants Trump to win, it might show you that he's going to win. It seems pretty likely at this point. But what you
Well,
can take
we'll
comfort
see.
in,
We'll see. There's a couple
yeah,
months left.
yeah. But what it does show us is that God is in control of the situation. That's something you can actually actively take comfort in
Mhm.
now.
Yep.
Including if you want to vote blue, right?
Right.
Because ultimately you can take comfort that just in the same way someone who votes red can take comfort that God is still sovereign when someone blue comes into power, in the same way he's sovereign when someone red comes into power.
I had a conversation with someone, and they're a believer, and they were saying to me, he was saying to me, I believe that if Trump gets elected, it's going to start the 7-year tribulation. And I was like, bro, that's not how the 7-year tribulation works, right? Like, okay, do you think God's like the seven? It's like, whatever you think about the 7-year tribulation, right? That's a whole different story. But like the return of Jesus is known by the Father.
Right.
The hour and the day are known by the Father. God's not sitting there going, "Oh, you know what? Trump made it. I'm gonna give him another 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Or Trump got in, and I'm gonna subtract 4 years, right?
God's not watching CNN to decide when the end times are happening.
Right. You know what? This seems like it would be a good time, Jesus.
Right. Not how that works.
It would be a bigly time to go down there.
No, how it does work. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord.
What a great verse.
He turns it wherever he will."
Right. What a great verse.
So God is, people make their decisions, they make their plans, but ultimately God is the one directing all this.
Mm-hmm.
He's directing Vladimir Putin, he's directing Kim Jong-un, he's directing Joe Biden, he's directing Donald Trump. They're all just pieces on a larger chessboard of what God is doing in human history. And so right now you can't look at the board and say, okay, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. Because, the guy who died was like legitimately a good dude.
A good guy, right?
Right?
Yeah, I'm sure all of the people who got injured were.
I mean, but this guy is a firefighter.
Yep.
He's a believing Christian.
Yep. Saved his family.
Put his body between him and his wife, right?
The like so heroic, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So he's an embodiment of what Christianity is supposed to look like, both in his day job and in his final moments.
Right.
Right. That's not someone who deserved to die.
Right.
In that moment.
Right.
But nevertheless, God is working his ways that allows for the death of some and the lives of others for his own purposes and for his ultimate good and the good of his people too.
Yep. So can I add something to that?
Yeah.
It says in the book of Romans chapter 8 that God works all things according to his purpose for those who love him. Right. So I think one way that you can know, I'm about to get evangelical here, but if there's one way you want to know that, God is in control and that he's capable of working all of these things, not just for the world's good, but for your good, the thing is an invitation to know Jesus, right? Because that's why I'm not freaked out.
Right.
Right. Like, that's why I know that there are a lot of believers who are like, we're all like, it can't figure out exactly how it happened or why it happened, but we know that God's in control. And it's funny, my daughter is 11 years old and we were watching some of the fallout, the news coverage after and the discussions back and forth. We didn't let her see like the whole, any of the crazy stuff, the bloody stuff. But, her first response is, well, it feels like we're living in a simulation, right? Like, people think that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like they go right to this thing because it's baked in that it has to be out of control, maybe not out of control, but scripted, right? Like, there's somebody back there with a keyboard or something. And, God doesn't work that way. Everything that he does is in love and for the purpose of restoring all of humanity to himself, right? Through a relationship through his son Jesus. Just because crazy stuff happens doesn't mean that he like took his hand off the wheel, right? Like doesn't mean that he's like backing off. And you can, know like peace in the middle of that because of that.
Yeah, it's not a simulation, but it is a story.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, right.
so check out this verse from Isaiah 8, and I think it's a good word for Christians in this time and place. The Lord spoke thus to me with his strong hand upon me, and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him shall you honor as holy. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread.
What translation is that?
ESV.
That's great. That's a great verse. Like the way that it puts it, particularly with the, the use of the conspiracy theory. That's like, listen, I grew up Muslim. That's all church believe, right? Like everything is a conspiracy.
And this isn't saying there's never any conspiracy behind this,
Right.
right?
No, there probably is, and to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Like, but to the point where somebody's getting the tip of their ear blown off is probably not part of the conspiracy, right? Like,
and so, are there people plotting in dark rooms nefarious things? 100%, absolutely, there are.
there always have been,
There always have,
and there always will be,
but it doesn't matter.
right?
The people who are planning conspiracies only think they are in control.
Right.
And actually, what this is showing us right now is that no one is actually in control except the storyteller himself.
Yes. So here's another good one. Can you look up Psalm 2?
I have
Okay. So it's perfect, right? It's perfect.
All right.
We didn't talk about that, by the way.
Yeah, this again, storyteller.
Right.
Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I'll tell the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry with you, and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him.
I think it's important to remember in light of that, right? Like when we're trying to overlook like the obvious, okay? Like the obvious thing is that the divine hand of God spared this man's life for whatever reason. We can lend ourselves over to trying to manipulate the facts to fit our narrative and to fit our dialogue. But Psalm 2 is a great reason why you shouldn't do that, right? It's understanding that, you know what, the Lord has set his king, his Messiah, on a throne and given that person authority, given Jesus the authority over all the earth and everything that happens in it. I think the hard part for people to understand is like bad things are going to happen. They're not from the hand of God. Things that bring death aren't from the hand of God. God's desires to bring life, right? But there are forces at work that are evil. There are evil kings. There are, cabals of people. There are technocrats. There have always been dictators. There have been all of these things throughout history that are trying to undermine God's sovereign purpose. And, don't get lost in that.
Right.
Right.
Again, he allows their presence, right? He's not the one being like, hey, go do evil things.
Right.
But he allows those things to happen.
Right.
And directs them and works them towards his own purposes.
I'm going to be preaching on Balaam, soon. I think, and one thing that I got was in the story of Balaam, because he's dealing with the king, right? The king of Moab, and he hires a sorcerer to be able to cast a spell, right, on Israel in the wilderness. And one thing that I see there is God says, don't go with him. And the entire time he's trying to weasel his way into going with him because there's like a big pot of gold, a big bag of money at the end. Um, and I think, in the middle of all of that, like in that story in particular, you can just see God standing sovereign over the entire thing, right? He'll let you do what you want to do, even if he tells you not to. He'll tell you not to. He's not going to sit there over and over again. That's a parent, right? Like that's what I do to my kids. Like, how many times I have to tell you to shut the garbage can lid because I found the dog eating your yogurt. You know what I mean? Like, I'll say that over and over again. But, I find that God like lays his command out and you're supposed to follow it. And it's not like a discussion back and forth. It's how can I get you to follow that commandment, right? How can I get you to follow that commandment so that you're blessed? So, I think it's just important to not lose sight of those things and remember that, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. He's in control.
Exactly. So I think I want to close with sort of this, train of thought. In the book of Judges, everyone does what is right in their own eye.
Right.
Then God sends a judge who's not always the most righteous character to show his mercy to his people. And that's actually, I think, fairly analogous to the election cycle, right? Pick your team however you want to see that, right? Whether you want to see the Democrats as God's judgment and Republicans as God's mercy, or, flip it the other way around if you like. The metaphor still works.
Right.
But let's say Trump becomes president. He's got 4 years maximum now, right? That's all he's got, right? Even if you're someone who wants him to, remove term limits because of some creepy technicality, he's still an old man. He's not going to live forever. Political leaders come and go. Political parties come and go. And it's like it is happening in England right now. We just had a trade out for the left, and everybody is like, yes, now the left is in power, and we are charting the course to a inevitable and eternal future with us in power. And the Conservatives thought that when they won 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is this: these things are like tides and seasons.
France and South America, and they go back and forth. Right. Yeah.
Summer comes, and then winter comes.
Right.
Right. It's a cycle in human politics, and human society is like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the point that people miss in the book of Judges is they will rally around the judge temporarily, but they won't go deeper and find the God below.
Gosh, that's so true.
The providence, right?
Right, absolutely.
So the opportunity right now, if you're feeling, okay, God's hand is upon Donald Trump in the way he saved him. Yeah, that's true. Don't let your hope be in Donald Trump.
Right.
You can enjoy Trump, you can pray for Trump, all of that's fine. But don't let your hope be there. Donald Trump is not the Messiah. The hope is in the Messiah that already died and rose from the dead and is reigning over everything now. And he is good, and he can provide for you and your family and everything you need, whether or not a Republican or a Democrat is in the White House. Whether we're under capitalism or communism, God is good to his people, and you can trust him in any circumstance.
I mean, I would say amen. That's great.
Guys, thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We will see you next time.